My name is Vanessa, I'm 38 years old, and I live in San Diego, California. People often say that the holiday season is about family, about gathering with those who raised you and feeling grateful for the bonds that hold everyone together. For me, those words have always sounded like they belong to someone else's life. My experience of family has never been about warmth or security. It has been about being invisible. From the time I was a child, I learned how to shrink myself into corners, how to expect nothing and accept even less. I built the life despite that neglect. I married Marcus, a man who has stood by me through every storm. We raised our daughter, Maya, who is 15 now, bright, sensitive, and with a voice so beautiful that when she sings, it feels like the world pauses for a moment. We are also lucky to have my in-laws, Vivian and Harold, who treat me as if I were their own daughter. Their kindness has always made me wonder what it would have felt like to grow up with parents like them. But when I think of my own parents, Carol and Samuel, the memories are different. Their attention was always reserved for my younger siblings, Tracy, my sister, and Justin, my brother. Birthdays, graduations, milestones, they celebrated them with pride and gifts, while I stood in the background. When I scraped together money for college, it was from late nights working part-time jobs. When I got married, Marcus and I covered nearly every expense ourselves. Even when Maya was born, their congratulations were shallow, as if the moment barely mattered. I kept telling myself that one day things would change, that one day I'd matter to them the way Tracy and Justin always did. For years, I've carried that hope like a stone in my chest. Hope can be heavy, especially when it's rarely rewarded. I tried to let go of it, but whenever holidays rolled around, it would resurface, whispering that maybe this year things would be different. This Thanksgiving was no exception. When Carol called and invited me to dinner, I hesitated. Marcus had an unavoidable business meeting that day, and Vivian and Harold weren't invited at all. It would just be me and Maya walking into the lion's den of my childhood home. I almost declined, but Maya looked at me with her eager brown eyes and said, "Mom, maybe it'll be nice this time." I didn't want to disappoint her. Part of me also wondered, what if this was the moment my parents finally opened their arms? So I said yes. As I stood in front of my closet that morning, choosing a simple dress and watching Maya twirl in hers, I tried to silence the gnawing voice that warned me otherwise. I told myself to be open, to believe in the possibility of peace. Yet deep inside, a chill lingered. I couldn't shake the sense that this Thanksgiving would change everything, but not in the way I hoped. Growing up in San Diego should have been sunshine and surfboards, but for me, childhood often felt like living under a shadow that stretched across every corner of my life. My parents, Carol and Samuel, weren't cruel in the obvious ways that people think of when they imagine neglect. They provided food, a roof, and school supplies when necessary. But there's another kind of neglect, emotional, invisible, corrosive, that eats away at you slowly. It was the kind I knew best. My sister Tracy was the golden child. From as early as I can remember, she had a spotlight shining on her that never dimmed. Carol would brush her hair, tie ribbons in it, and brag to neighbors about her grades, her dance recitals, her endless potential. Samuel would boast about Justin, my younger brother, as if he were already a star athlete long before he ever set foot on a field. But when it came to me, I was the afterthought. I was the kid who did well enough in school without needing attention, the one who was expected to handle herself, the one who didn't deserve praise because you already know how to manage. Birthdays were especially painful. I still remember turning 12. Tracy got a bicycle with pink streamers on the handles that year, and Justin received a set of baseball gear for his birthday around the same time. When my birthday arrived, I got a discount sweater 2 sizes too big and a pat on the shoulder. No cake, no singing, no candles. I told myself it didn't matter, but that night, lying in bed, I whispered a quiet happy birthday to myself in the dark. As I grew older, the disparities widened. When Tracy wanted to join cheerleading, my parents paid for uniforms and driving lessons. When Justin needed extra tutoring for math, they hired someone without hesitation. When I asked if I could join a writing workshop at school, I was told, "We can't afford extra things for everyone, Vanessa. You'll be fine." That line, "You'll be fine," became the anthem of my adolescence. It wasn't encouragement. It was dismissal. When college came around, my friends packed for dorm life with the excitement of young adults stepping into independence. My parents told me, flatly, "We can't help with tuition." Yet, months later, I overheard them bragging about saving up to help Justin when his turn came. I worked 2 jobs, pouring coffee at dawn and shelving books at night, and somehow scraped together enough loans and scholarships to make it through. My parents never visited my campus once, never asked about finals, never came to see me graduate. I stood in my cap and gown while Marcus, who was my boyfriend back then, sat proudly in the audience, clapping louder than anyone else. My parents didn't even send flowers. The pattern repeated when I married Marcus. While other brides I knew had families who pitched in for gowns, venues, or receptions, I had none of that. Carol said, "It's your choice to marry young, so you and Marcus should handle it." Marcus' parents, Vivian and Harold, stepped in graciously. They helped us book a small but beautiful reception at a beachside community hall. Vivian even bought me the dress I'd been secretly admiring, saying, "Every bride deserves to feel radiant." I cried in the fitting room, not just because I looked beautiful, but because for the first time, I felt like someone thought I was worthy of care. When Maya was born, my heart burst with a love I had never known. Holding her tiny hand, I promised her silently that I would never let her feel the way I had felt growing up. I waited for my parents to come to the hospital, expecting maybe this time they'd show up with balloons or flowers. They came late, with an awkward smile, stood for a few minutes, and left. Tracy never even visited. A week later, Carol called me only to say, "Make sure you don't let the baby distract you from keeping the house clean." It was like my motherhood didn't count, like Maya's arrival wasn't worth celebrating. Over the years, the emotional gap only grew. Holidays at my parents' home were always orchestrated around Tracy and Justin. If Tracy got a new job, the entire family would toast to her success. If Justin bought a car, there would be pictures taken and stories retold 100 times. I would sit at the edge of the sofa, waiting for someone to ask me about my life, my work, my child. The questions never came. When I spoke up, I often felt invisible. It was as if my words bounced off the walls and vanished into the air. Marcus noticed the toll it was taking on me. More than once, he asked, "Why do you still go? Why do you still hope?" I didn't always have an answer. Part of me believed that one day they would see me, not as the capable, invisible daughter, but as someone worth loving. Another part of me stayed for Maya's sake. I wanted her to know her grandparents, to at least try and give her a sense of family, even if it was flawed. Vivian and Harold, on the other hand, filled the void more than anyone else. They doted on Maya, showing up for school recitals, cheering her on at soccer games, celebrating her wins, big and small. They treated me like a daughter, never once making me feel like an outsider. Sometimes, I wondered if Maya even noticed the difference. That one set of grandparents clapped the loudest at her every achievement, while the other barely remembered her birthday. As Maya grew older, she began to notice, though. "Mom," she asked once, "why does Grandma Carol always buy gifts for Aunt Tracy, but never for me?" The question broke me. I had no answer that wouldn't reveal the painful truth. So I told her, "Sometimes people forget what's important, but you have people who love you very much." It was the only way to shield her from the rejection I had carried all my life. By the time this Thanksgiving invitation arrived, I had a lifetime of reasons to say no. And yet I said yes. Maybe it was stubborn hope. Maybe it was denial. Or maybe it was Maya's smile when she said, "Let's go, Mom." Whatever it was, I chose to walk back into the house where my worth had always been questioned. I told myself things might be different. Deep down, though, I couldn't ignore the whisper that told me history was about to repeat itself in the worst way. The afternoon sun was just beginning to sink lower in the San Diego sky when Maya and I pulled up outside my parents' house. From the street, the place looked warm and welcoming, strung with soft lights and decorated with autumn wreaths. A long table was set up in the front lawn, covered with a crisp white cloth, rows of chairs, and the centerpiece, an oversized roasted turkey that glistened under the fading light. To an outsider, it would have looked like a picture-perfect Thanksgiving celebration, the kind that could be featured in a magazine spread. For me, though, appearances were nothing but a fragile mask. Maya bounced out of the car with the energy of a 15-year-old who still wanted to believe family gatherings could be fun. She smoothed her dress nervously, a floral print number she had picked out herself. "It looks pretty, Mom," she whispered, her eyes scanning the lanterns that hung along the fence and the guests already milling about. I forced a smile. "It does," I said, though inside I felt that old knot of anxiety twist tighter. As we walked up the path, my mother Carol emerged from the doorway, her apron dusted with flour. She smiled, but it was thin, more of a polite twitch than genuine warmth. "You made it," she said, brushing her hands together as though my arrival were a minor inconvenience. She kissed Maya quickly on the cheek and gave me a glance that was neither welcoming nor hostile, just indifferent. That indifference hurt more than outright rejection. The lawn buzzed with chatter. Neighbors, cousins, and extended relatives mingled around the food tables. My father Samuel stood near the grill, a beer in his hand, laughing at something Justin said. My brother was dressed casually, looking relaxed, like the prodigal son home from some adventure. He clapped my shoulder half-heartedly when I approached, muttering, "Hey, sis," before quickly turning back to his conversation. Tracy, on the other hand, looked polished as ever. She wore a designer sweater and gold earrings, her phone glued to her hand as she showed off photos to anyone willing to look. Maya slipped away toward the younger cousins, giggling as she joined a small group near the dessert table. Watching her smile, I allowed myself to breathe for a moment. Maybe, just maybe, she'd have a better time than I expected. We all gathered around the table as Samuel carved the turkey. Carol fussed over the dishes, making sure everyone knew which ones Tracy had contributed. "Tracy made the sweet potato casserole. Doesn't it look wonderful?" she said loudly, ignoring the pumpkin pie I had brought. No one asked about it. No one even placed it near the center of the table. It sat at the far end unnoticed. I took a seat beside Maya, across from Tracy. As the plates were passed around, I caught the way Tracy's eyes flicked over me with quiet disdain, like she was waiting for me to embarrass myself. She boasted about her new promotion at work, about her latest shopping trip, about friends in Los Angeles. Everyone listened intently, nodding, chiming in with admiration. When I tried to mention Maya's upcoming choir audition, Carol cut me off, asking Justin if he'd chosen his courses for the next semester. My words dissolved into the hum of conversation, unheard. Maya reached under the table and squeezed my hand. That small gesture was enough to ground me, to remind me that even if this family didn't value us, we valued each other. The evening stretched on with forced politeness. Children darted across the lawn, laughter mixing with the clinking of glasses. Tracy scrolled through her phone, showing off the expensive new case she had bought. "Latest model," she bragged, holding it up. "Cost me a fortune, but worth it." Carol leaned closer to admire it, her eyes sparkling with pride as if Tracy had just won an award. I tried to focus on Maya, watching her joke with her cousins, her face glowing in the lantern light. But unease gnawed at me. I had been here too many times before, sitting at a table where I was both present and absent, where my existence was tolerated but never celebrated. Something about the way Tracy's laughter carried, sharp and smug, made me fear the night would not end quietly. And then it happened. Maya, running across the lawn to fetch something from the dessert table, brushed past Tracy's chair. In an instant, Tracy's phone slipped from her hand, hitting the stone pathway with a sickening crack. The screen spiderwebbed instantly, the glittering case offering no protection. The chatter fell silent. Tracy stared at the shattered phone, her face draining of color before flushing crimson with rage. I felt my chest tighten. I knew that look. I knew the storm that was about to break. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the lanterns strung across the lawn and the shallow, horrified gasp that slipped from Maya's lips. Tracy's chair screeched against the patio stones as she shot to her feet, her eyes locked on the shattered phone as if it were a piece of her soul lying in ruins. You stupid girl, she snapped, her voice cutting through the silence like broken glass. She turned on Maya, her face twisted with fury. Do you have any idea how much that cost me? Do you know what you've done? Maya stammered, her hands trembling at her sides. I didn't mean to. But Tracy was beyond reason. Carol rushed forward, not to defend Maya but to soothe her favorite daughter. Oh, Tracy, I'm so sorry, she cried, brushing at Tracy's arm as if comforting the victim of a crime. We'll figure something out. Don't be upset. My father Samuel scowled, his eyes narrowing at Maya. You need to watch where you're going, young lady, he said sharply, his voice carrying the weight of judgment he had never spared for his other grandchildren. I rose from my chair, my pulse pounding. She didn't do it on purpose, I said firmly. My words seemed to float in the air, unacknowledged, as Tracy bent down, cradling the ruined phone like a wounded animal. Then she straightened, her eyes blazing, and for the first time I saw something primal in her expression. It was no longer just about the phone. It was about years of resentment, entitlement, and unchecked temper. Her gaze flicked to the edge of the lawn where gardening tools leaned against the fence, left out from earlier yard work. Before I could react, she strode over and seized a shovel by its handle. The metallic clang as she lifted it made my stomach drop. Tracy, don't, I warned, my voice trembling but loud enough to make heads turn. But she was past listening. With a sharp, furious motion, she swung the shovel and brought it crashing against Maya's shoulder. The dull thud echoed through the yard, followed by my daughter's piercing scream. The sound ripped through me, a sound no mother should ever hear. Maya crumpled to the ground, clutching her shoulder, tears streaming down her face as blood began to soak through her dress where the metal edge had torn the skin. Stop, I shouted, rushing forward, shoving Tracy back with all the strength I had. My hands shook as I knelt beside Maya, my eyes blurring with panic. It's okay, sweetheart, I've got you, I whispered, though my voice cracked with terror. Around us, the scene dissolved into chaos. Children cried, retreating to their parents. Relatives whispered frantically, some frozen in shock, others fumbling with their phones. Carol stood rooted to the spot, her hand covering her mouth but her eyes still darting toward Tracy with more concern than toward Maya. Samuel muttered something about making a scene, as if the wound on my daughter's shoulder were a minor inconvenience rather than an act of violence. Maya's sobs grew louder, each one stabbing at my heart. She clutched at my arm, her face pale. It hurts, Mom, she whimpered. I pressed my hand against the wound, trying to stem the bleeding with the fabric of my scarf. I know, baby. I know. Hold on, I said, forcing myself to stay calm though rage thundered in my chest. I turned on my parents, my voice like fire. This is what your silence has created. This is the daughter you chose to raise, violent, spoiled, cruel. And now my child is the one paying the price. Tracy, breathing heavily, still clutched the shovel, her knuckles white against the handle. She ruined my phone, she shouted, as if that justified everything. She's a child. I roared back. My words hung in the air, trembling with fury. And you. I pointed at Carol and Samuel, my fingers shaking. You've allowed this for years. You've ignored me, belittled me, and now you've turned a blind eye while your favorite daughter just attacked my child. Some of the relatives stirred, murmuring agreements, but none of them dared to intervene. It was easier to watch the disaster than to stop it. I pulled my phone from my bag with one bloodied hand, my decision absolute. I'm done. I am not covering for you anymore. I am not letting this slide. My thumb dialed 3 numbers. 911. Tracy's eyes widened, the first flicker of fear replacing her rage. Carol stepped forward quickly. Vanessa, don't call the police. Let's just handle this as a family. No need to ruin Thanksgiving. I cut her off with a look so sharp she fell silent. Family? I spat the word like it was poison. You stopped being my family a long time ago. As Maya whimpered against me, the phone pressed to my ear, I spoke into the receiver with a steady voice I didn't know I possessed. This is an emergency. My sister just assaulted my daughter with a shovel. We need police and an ambulance right away. In that moment, as the weight of my words settled over the lawn, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The dispatcher's calm voice on the other end of the line steadied me as I gave the address, my words clipped and urgent. Within minutes, the wail of sirens pierced the air, growing louder until flashing red and blue lights painted the street outside my parents' home. Neighbors peeked from porches, their curiosities spilling into the night. For once, I didn't care who was watching. All I cared about was Maya, trembling against me, her small body pressed into my lap as I tried to keep pressure on her wound. The squad car pulled up first, 2 San Diego police officers stepping out with purposeful strides. Behind them, the ambulance rolled in, headlights cutting across the lawn. The officers moved quickly, their presence commanding silence over the chaos. "Ma'am, we got your call," one said, his eyes scanning the scene before landing on Tracy, who still clutched the shovel with a stunned expression. "Drop the weapon. Now." Tracy's bravado faltered. For a second, she looked at Carol, then at Samuel, as if waiting for them to shield her like they always had. Carol raised her hands helplessly, whispering, "It was an accident." But the officer cut her off firmly. "Ma'am, step aside." Tracy finally let the shovel clatter onto the grass. The sound echoed in my chest like a release, but it didn't erase what she had done. The second officer moved in, securing Tracy's wrists in handcuffs with a practiced motion. Her protest spilled out. "It wasn't my fault. She ran into me. She broke my phone." But they fell flat against the undeniable evidence of a child clutching a bleeding shoulder. Meanwhile, paramedics rushed to Maya's side. One knelt beside me, gently moving my hand to inspect the wound. "She's stable," he said, his voice calm, "but she needs stitches. We'll get her loaded up." Maya whimpered as they cleaned the gash, her face pale, but she squeezed my hand tightly. "I'm here, sweetheart," I whispered, brushing hair from her damp forehead. "You're safe now." As the paramedics lifted Maya onto the stretcher, Marcus arrived. He sprinted across the lawn, his face a mask of fury and fear. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice breaking as he knelt beside Maya and kissed her forehead. When he looked up at me, his eyes blazed. "Who did this?" I didn't need to answer. His gaze had already landed on Tracy, who was being led toward the police car. He took a step forward, fists clenched, but I grabbed his arm. "Don't," I said firmly. "The law will handle her now." The officer gave a small nod of acknowledgement, as if to assure me justice was already in motion. Tracy was guided into the back seat of the patrol car, her head ducked low, her words muffled behind glass as she continued to protest. Neighbors whispered at the edges of the lawn, some shaking their heads, others whispering, "I can't believe she did that." But I believed it. I had always known the cruelty lurking beneath the surface. As the ambulance doors closed around Maya, I climbed in beside her, Marcus right at my side. The sirens wailed again as we pulled away, leaving behind the house where I had been invisible for decades but where, tonight, my voice had finally been heard. For the first time in my life, I had drawn a line that my family could never erase. The fluorescent lights of the emergency department flickered softly overhead as the paramedics wheeled Maya through the sliding glass doors. The antiseptic scent of the hospital wrapped around me, sharp and sterile, a reminder that we were far from the chaos of my parents' lawn. I clutched Maya's hand as the stretcher rolled, my heart pounding with every small whimper she made. Marcus stayed close on the other side, his free hand clenched into a fist at his side, his jaw tight with fury he was barely containing. A nurse met us quickly, guiding the stretcher into a treatment bay. "We'll take care of her, Mom," she assured me, gently pulling the curtain around us. A doctor soon followed, his voice calm and professional as he assessed the injury. "A laceration along the shoulder, but it's clean. She'll need stitches, maybe 8 to 10. We'll also do an X-ray to rule out a fracture." Maya's eyes filled with tears as they prepared her for the procedure. "It's okay, honey," I murmured, stroking her hair. "You're so brave. Just a little while longer and it'll all be over." Marcus kissed her forehead, whispering, "You're stronger than you know, Maya. We're right here." As the doctor worked, I couldn't stop replaying the scene over and over. The crack of the shovel, the scream that tore from Maya's throat, Tracy's twisted face of rage. Anger surged in me, mingled with guilt. I had brought Maya there. I had believed, against all reason, that maybe this year would be different. The curtain rustled, and familiar voices spilled through. "Vanessa?" It was Vivian and Harold. Relief washed over me at the sight of them. Vivian hurried forward, her arms wrapping around me in a fierce embrace. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, her eyes glassy. "We came as soon as Marcus called." Harold stood beside Marcus, his expression grim. He placed a hand on Marcus' shoulder, steadying him. "We'll get through this," he said firmly. "That girl, what she did, she'll answer for it." When Vivian saw Maya lying on the bed, pale but awake, she bent low and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "My brave little songbird," she said softly, brushing Maya's hair back. "You'll heal, and we'll all be here for you." Tears pricked my eyes as I watched the love between them. In that moment, the contrast was undeniable. The family I was born into had failed me time and again, but the family I had chosen, through marriage, through love, was the one that stood unshakably at my side. The doctor finished stitching and smiled reassuringly. "She's going to be just fine. Some soreness, a scar, but with rest she'll heal fully. We'll discharge her tonight after observation." Maya gave a small, tired smile, her fingers still curled around mine. "It hurts, Mom," she whispered, "but I feel better now." I kissed her temple. "That's because you're safe. You'll never have to be afraid of them again." Marcus turned to me, his voice steady but burning with anger. "We're pressing charges. This isn't just assault, it was on a child. Tracy doesn't get away with this. Not this time." I nodded, my own resolve solidifying. "I've protected them for too long. Tonight it ends." Vivian squeezed my hand. "And when you walk into that courtroom, remember, you're not alone anymore. You have us, you have Marcus, and you have Maya. That's your family." As Maya drifted into a light sleep, her chest rising and falling in calm rhythm, I sat beside her and let the weight of the day settle. My parents had chosen their path when they turned away from me years ago. Tonight, they had revealed the full measure of their neglect and cruelty. But in the hospital's quiet, surrounded by the people who truly loved us, I knew the future would not belong to them. It would belong to us. And the fight for justice was only just beginning. The days following the attack blurred together in a haze of paperwork, phone calls, and sleepless nights. Maya's shoulder was healing, the stitches neat beneath a bandage, but the memory of her scream haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it again, the echo of pain, the sound of innocence shattered by my own sister's rage. I promised myself that Maya would never have to carry that burden alone. This time, justice would not slip quietly into the shadows. 2 days after the incident, an officer from the San Diego Police Department visited our home to take a detailed statement. Marcus sat beside me at the kitchen table, his hand resting firmly on mine. Maya, still sore but determined, insisted on telling her side of the story too. Her voice wavered when she described the shovel striking her shoulder, but her courage impressed the officer. He listened carefully, nodding, making notes, and assuring us that the district attorney's office was taking the case seriously. "The charge is assault with a deadly weapon," the officer explained. "Given the victim is a minor, the DA will be pursuing felony charges. There's no doubt about that." Hearing those words gave me a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because Tracy would finally face consequences. Dread because it meant dragging my entire family into a courtroom, exposing the rot that had festered for decades. Within a week, a subpoena arrived in the mail. I was required to testify. Maya, too, would have to give her account, though the DA assured us a victim advocate would be present to support her. Marcus clenched his jaw as he read the letter. "They'll try to twist it. They'll try to protect Tracy. But we'll be ready." The first pretrial hearing was surreal. Standing in the polished courtroom, I felt small but resolute. Tracy appeared in an orange jumpsuit, her hands shackled. She still managed to carry herself with defiance, her chin tilted high, her eyes darting to me with venom. Carol and Samuel sat behind her, whispering to each other, casting me looks of betrayal as though I were the villain. Not once did they glance at Maya, who sat beside me, her arm still tender under her jacket. The judge reviewed the charges aloud, assault with a deadly weapon against a minor. Each word rang heavy in the air. Tracy's attorney pleaded for bail reduction, arguing she was a valued member of the community and that the incident was a family dispute blown out of proportion. The prosecutor countered sharply, pointing to the medical reports, photographs of Maya's injuries, and witness statements gathered from relatives who had been at the dinner. The judge denied the reduction. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in Tracy's eyes. Outside the courtroom, reporters lingered. The case had gained local attention, not because of who we were, but because of the shocking nature of the assault. A Thanksgiving dinner turned violent was the kind of story that made headlines. I kept my head down, shielding Maya from cameras, while Marcus guided us to the car. Back at home, the weight of everything pressed down on me. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from relatives urging me to drop the charges. Some begged, others threatened, accusing me of tearing the family apart. I ignored them all. The family had been fractured long before this. Tracy's act had only exposed what was already broken. One evening, as I was tucking Maya into bed, she whispered, "Mom, are they going to make me see Aunt Tracy again?" My heart clenched. "No, sweetheart," I said firmly, brushing her hair back. "You won't have to see her outside of court. And when you do, you'll have me, Dad, and a whole team of people standing with you. You're safe." The district attorney's office worked diligently, gathering evidence and interviewing witnesses. A cousin admitted under oath that they saw Tracy grab the shovel deliberately, not accidentally. Another relative testified that Carol had tried to minimize the incident immediately, urging people not to call the police. Those statements strengthened the case, painting a clear picture of both the assault and the family dynamic that enabled it. Each new development brought a strange mix of pain and empowerment. Pain because every detail reminded me of the night Maya was hurt. Empowerment because for once, the truth was being laid bare. By the time the trial date was set, I no longer felt like the invisible daughter my parents had raised. I felt like a mother on fire, carrying the weight of justice not just for myself, but for Maya. The law was finally on our side, and I intended to see it through. The courthouse in downtown San Diego loomed ahead of us like a fortress of glass and stone, its flags fluttering in the ocean breeze. My stomach knotted as we walked up the steps, Marcus on one side, Maya on the other. Her shoulder had healed, the stitches removed, but the faint scar remained, a constant reminder of that night. She wore her favorite denim jacket, the one with embroidered flowers on the back, as if the brightness of it could shield her from what was coming. Inside, the air was cool and still, the corridors buzzing with murmured conversations and the steady shuffle of papers. We took our seats in the courtroom, the polished benches creaking under the weight of anxious families and curious observers. The case had drawn attention, and the gallery was fuller than I had expected. I tried to block it all out, focusing instead on Maya's small hand gripping mine. Tracy was led in wearing civilian clothes this time, her hair neatly brushed, makeup carefully applied to soften her features. It was a calculated attempt to appear harmless, but her eyes gave her away, sharp, defiant, and simmering with resentment. She sat beside her attorney, who leaned close, whispering strategies. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The sound of the gavel echoed like a heartbeat. The people of the state of California versus Tracy Reynolds, the bailiff announced, and the trial began. The prosecution wasted no time laying out the evidence. Photographs of Maya's injury were displayed on a screen, red, raw, undeniable. The medical report detailed the depth of the laceration, the stitches, the potential for permanent scarring. The police officers who responded that night testified, describing how they found Tracy still clutching the shovel and refusing to take responsibility. Then came the witnesses. A cousin, trembling under oath, admitted they saw Tracy march across the lawn, pick up the shovel, and strike deliberately. Another relative revealed that Carol had immediately tried to stop anyone from calling 911, insisting the matter be handled privately. Gasps rippled through the courtroom at that admission, the judge scribbling notes with narrowed eyes. When it was my turn, I rose slowly, my palms sweating. I took the stand, swore the oath, and met the prosecutor's gaze. "Tell us what happened that night," he prompted gently. I recounted everything. Our arrival, the strained dinner, the way Maya accidentally bumped Tracy, the phone shattering, and then the horrifying moment when the shovel came down. My voice broke when I described Maya's scream, but I pressed on, my eyes locked on the jurors. She didn't care that it was a child. She didn't hesitate. She just attacked. The defense tried to paint another picture. They argued that Tracy was momentarily overwhelmed, that it was an accident fueled by stress and wine. They hinted that Maya had been careless, that I had exaggerated. But their words crumbled against the mountain of evidence. No one could mistake a deliberate swing of a shovel for an accident. When Maya was called, my heart squeezed with fear. But she walked to the stand bravely, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't mean to break her phone," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I was just running. And then she hit me. It hurt so bad, and I didn't understand why my family didn't help me." Her words pierced the silence, cutting deeper than any lawyer's argument could. After closing statements, the jury filed out. The wait felt endless, each tick of the clock a drumbeat in my chest. When they returned, I held my breath. The foreperson stood, reading the verdict aloud. Guilty of assault with a deadly weapon, felony charge. Relief washed over me so sharply, I nearly collapsed. Tracy's face twisted with shock, then fury, as if she had believed until the last second that she could escape accountability. The sentencing came a week later. The courtroom was quieter this time, but the weight of the moment was heavier. The judge addressed Tracy sternly. "You struck a 15-year-old child with a dangerous weapon, causing serious injury. This court cannot, and will not excuse such conduct." He sentenced her to 4 years in state prison, without the possibility of early parole. Gasps filled the room again. Tracy sobbed, shouting at Carol and Samuel for not doing enough to protect her. Carol wept openly, while Samuel sat rigid, his jaw clenched. But the judge wasn't finished. Turning to my parents, he referenced their obstruction, Carol's attempt to prevent a 911 call, Samuel's downplaying of the crime. "Your actions did not rise to the level of physical assault, but they demonstrate a disturbing pattern of neglect and complicity." They were sentenced to 2 years of probation, fines, mandatory counseling, and a no-contact order. The final ruling struck like thunder. Tracy, Carol, and Samuel were all forbidden from contacting me, Marcus, or Maya ever again. The judge's voice was firm. "This family has inflicted enough harm. The victims deserve peace." As the gavel came down, I felt the weight of decades lift from my shoulders. For the first time in my life, the truth had been spoken in a place where it mattered. Justice had been carved into stone, and the cycle of silence was broken. I turned to Maya, who leaned against me with a tired but hopeful smile. "It's over, Mom," she whispered. And I knew she was right. The weeks after sentencing felt strangely quiet, like stepping into a new life where the constant buzz of fear had finally been silenced. For the first time in years, I could wake up without dreading a phone call from my parents or anticipating Tracy's cutting remarks. The no-contact order was more than a legal boundary. It was freedom, a line drawn between the pain of the past and the possibility of healing. Maya's shoulder slowly recovered, the scar fading into a thin reminder of what she had survived. She still flinched at loud noises for a while, and sometimes she woke up from dreams where she was running across the lawn again, hearing the crack of that shovel. But therapy helped. A gentle counselor worked with her each week, teaching her how to talk about the fear, how to release it instead of carrying it inside. I started therapy too, something Marcus encouraged gently until I finally agreed. For years, I had buried my hurt, convinced it didn't matter. But in those sessions, I began to unpack what it meant to grow up unseen, to be dismissed and overshadowed. It was painful, but it was also freeing. For the first time, I wasn't trying to convince anyone of my worth. I was simply learning to believe it myself. Vivian and Harold became even more present in our lives. They showed up with groceries, brought flowers for Maya after each therapy session, and celebrated even the smallest victories with us. One evening, Vivian sat across from me at our kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "You have your family now," she said softly. "The one you built. Hold on to that." Her words sank deep, settling into the cracks where old wounds had lived. Marcus remained my anchor through it all. He never wavered, never hesitated to remind me that I wasn't alone. Sometimes, when I'd sit on the porch in the evening, watching the sun dip behind the horizon, he would slide his arm around me and whisper, "We made it through, Vanessa. You and me. We're stronger than them." And I knew he was right. The past would always exist, but it no longer owned us. The future was ours to shape, and for the first time, it looked bright. Spring arrived in San Diego with soft breezes carrying the scent of blooming jacaranda trees, their violet petals scattering across the sidewalks like confetti. By then, Maya's wound had healed, leaving only a faint scar on her shoulder. But more importantly, her spirit had healed too. Therapy, love, and time had restored the sparkle in her eyes. She had always loved to sing, humming tunes around the house, filling our mornings with music. So, when her school announced a citywide singing competition, she signed up without hesitation. The auditorium buzzed with energy the night of the competition. Rows of proud parents, friends, and teachers filled the seats, cameras ready. Marcus and I sat together in the middle row, with Vivian and Harold beside us. Vivian clutched a bouquet of fresh daisies for Maya, her eyes already glistening with pride. Harold adjusted his glasses, beaming like a man who had always believed his granddaughter could move mountains. When Maya's name was called, my heart raced. She stepped onto the stage in a simple dress, her hair tied back neatly. The spotlight washed over her, and for a brief moment, she looked so small against the vast stage. But then she lifted the microphone, took a deep breath, and began to sing. Her voice was clear, steady, and beautiful. It carried through the hall like sunlight breaking through clouds. The audience fell into silence, every note drawing them deeper into her world. I felt tears sting my eyes as I listened, not just because she sang so well, but because I could hear the strength in her voice, the resilience born from everything she had endured. Marcus slipped his hand into mine, squeezing gently. "That's our girl," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Vivian dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, whispering a soft prayer of thanks, while Harold sat straighter, nodding along with each note. When the song ended, there was a beat of silence, and then the auditorium erupted in applause. Maya bowed shyly, her cheeks flushed, before hurrying off stage. I stood as the judges tallied the scores, unable to sit still. Finally, the announcer returned to the microphone. "And the winner of this year's San Diego Youth Singing Competition is Maya Reynolds." The crowd erupted again, louder than before. Maya's face lit up with shock and joy as she walked back on stage to receive her trophy. She clutched it tightly, glancing into the audience until her eyes found mine. I blew her a kiss, mouthing, "I'm so proud of you." When she returned to us, we wrapped her in a circle of arms, Marcus, Vivian, Harold, and me. The bouquet was pressed into her hands and Vivian whispered, "Your voice is a gift, sweetheart. Never let anyone silence it." In that moment, surrounded by love, I realized something profound. My parents had tried to make me feel invisible my entire life. They had failed to recognize my worth, and they had tried to pass that same shadow onto my daughter. But here she was, standing in the light, her voice celebrated, her spirit unbroken. This was our ending, not in pain or silence, but in music, triumph, and love. And as Maya lifted her trophy high, I knew it was also our beginning. Thank you for watching this story until the end. If you enjoyed it and want to hear more powerful stories like this, make sure to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you more inspiring and emotional stories every day.